The morning sun crept gently over the crowded rooftops of Quezon City, washing the narrow streets in a golden glow. It was barely 7 a.m., but the city was already alive, jeepneys honking, vendors calling out breakfast specials, tricycles weaving between children in crisp school uniforms. Amid that daily chaos, there was one sound that always stood out. A rhythm that seemed to make time slow down for a moment. It came from the corner of Commonwealth Avenue, near the jeepney terminal, where a young man sat cross-legged on a worn piece of cardboard. His name was Rafa de Vera, 22 years old, with tired eyes that still managed to hold a spark. His brown skin glistened under the sunlight, and strands of black hair fell across his forehead as he bent over the small tabla resting between his knees. The tabla was old, the skin slightly torn at the edges, the wood scratched, but in Rafa's hands it became alive. His fingers moved with a kind of magic, sharp, delicate, and full of heart. Each tap, each rhythm had a story to tell. He played not just with technique, but with emotion, the kind that came from surviving the noise of life. Beside him, an open plastic cup collected coins from passersby. Some people tossed in a few pesos without looking, others stopped for a moment, curious about the strange blend of beats and rap echoing through the busy terminal. Dia ko mayaman, pero may tugtog sa kaluluwa, he rapped smoothly, smiling as his hands danced over the drum. I'm not rich, but I've got music in my soul. The words rolled off his tongue like poetry. His rap wasn't about money or fame, it was about heart. He sang of jeepney drivers who smiled despite long hours, of mothers who sold food by the roadside to send their kids to school, of dreams that refused to die even when life got hard. His verses painted pictures of everyday Filipinos, the ones who worked silently, loved deeply and kept believing. A group of construction workers paused nearby, their breakfast of pandesal and coffee forgotten. An old woman selling sampaguita necklaces swayed her head to the rhythm. A child on his way to school stopped to watch, wide-eyed. For a few precious minutes everyone forgot their worries. They were simply listening. When Rafa finished the song, the applause wasn't loud, but it was real. One of the workers shouted, "Estig ka bro, you're awesome bro," and clapped hard. The little boy from earlier ran up, dropping a few coins into the cup, grinning shyly. "Kuya, you sound like a whole band," he said, his voice full of awe. Rafa laughed softly, wiping the sweat from his forehead. "Nah kid, I just sound like home." The boy giggled and ran back to his mother, who smiled gratefully at Rafa before disappearing into the crowd. Slowly, the city's normal rhythm returned, the honking, the chatter, the rush. But for those few minutes, Rafa's music had made everything feel lighter. He packed his tabla carefully into his old backpack, treating it like something sacred. That tabla had been his father's, the one thing he left behind before he passed away. Every scratch, every dent held a memory. Rafa always felt that when he played it, his father was somehow still there, tapping along, keeping rhythm beside him. As he stood, a jeepney driver leaned out and called, "Oh Rafa, you make this road alive! Don't ever stop!" Rafa smiled and waved, "Salamat, Kuya." Then he began walking home, weaving through alleys painted with laundry lines and the scent of freshly cooked rice. Every few steps he'd tap the side of his bag, as if keeping time with the beat still echoing in his head. Home was a small, one-room house made of plywood and corrugated metal, barely big enough for 2 people, but it was filled with warmth. His mother, Aling Teresa, sat outside peeling onions for their small food stall. Her hands were rough, her hair tied in a bun streaked with silver, yet when she saw Rafa her whole face lit up. "Anak, you're early today," she said. "Did the people like your song?" Rafa nodded, sitting beside her. "They did, ma. Someone even said I sound like a whole band." She chuckled, shaking her head. "Of course you do. You've got your father's hands." He looked down at his fingers. "Calloused, strong. And your patience, ma," he said, smiling. She reached out and gently squeezed his hand. "Your papa would be proud, Anak. Remember what he used to tell you." Rafa nodded softly. "Music doesn't need a fancy stage, just a heart that means it." The words hung in the air, heavy and beautiful. His father, Manuel de Vera, had been a street musician too, a tabla player who performed outside markets and bus terminals. He used to carry young Rafa on his shoulders while playing, laughing as people dropped coins into his can. But then illness took him away when Rafa was just 13. The music stopped for a while after that, until one day, Rafa found his father's tabla wrapped in cloth under their bed. He touched it, and the sound came back. That afternoon, as the city simmered under the heat, Rafa sat by the window, cleaning the tabla carefully. He ran his fingers over the drum's worn surface and whispered, "Pa, I hope you can hear me." Sometimes he'd imagine his father sitting beside him, nodding to the beat, guiding him when his rhythm faltered. That thought kept him going through every struggle. Every day he played for strangers who might never remember his name. The streets were his stage now. The crowd changed every day, but the purpose never did, to share a piece of joy, to remind people that beauty could still exist even in the busiest, noisiest corners of life. That night, as he helped his mother pack up their food stall, a gentle wind blew through the alley. The scent of soy sauce, garlic, and music lingered together in the air. Rafa looked up at the faint stars peeking through the Manila haze and whispered to himself, "One day, I'll play somewhere big, not for fame but so everyone can hear how our story sounds." He smiled at the thought, a dream that felt far away, yet somehow close enough to touch. But for now, the streets were enough, because when he rapped, sang, and played his tabla beneath the morning sun, the world listened. And in those moments, Rafa wasn't just a street performer, he was the heartbeat of the city. Evenings in Quezon City carried a kind of melody of their own, tricycles rumbling, children laughing in the alleys, the faint hum of karaoke songs floating through open windows. But for Rafa and his mother, Aling Teresa, the soundtrack of their nights came from the sizzle of oil and the rhythm of customers arriving at their little food stall, Lutong Bahay ni Teresa. Under a flickering streetlight, the mother and son do work side by side. Rafa mixed pancit noodles in a large wok while Teresa handed plates to their regulars, construction workers, students, and jeepney drivers who called her Tita Tess.
Masarap na naman tita.
One customer said, slurping noodles noisily. Teresa laughed. "Of course! My son helped cook today. That's why it tastes like music." Everyone laughed but Rafa blushed, focusing on his cooking. He wasn't ashamed. He loved helping his mother. But sometimes he wondered if this was all life had for him, a routine of music in the morning, food at night, and dreams in between. When they closed for the evening, Rafa began cleaning up the stall while his mother counted the day's earnings. The coins clinked against the wooden table, sounding far fewer than they needed to be. He asked quietly. Teresa smiled faintly, almost a knack. "But don't worry, God always finds a way." Rafa nodded, though worry gnawed at him. He'd always wanted to give his mother more. A proper home, not one that leaked during rain, a real stove instead of a gas burner that hissed dangerously. But every time he tried to save up, life found another way to take the money back: medical bills, food, repairs. Still his mother never complained. "We have each other," she'd say, "Harned your music, that's enough." Later that night, after the streets grew quiet, Rafa sat on the edge of his small bed, cleaning his tabla with a cloth. The dim light from a single bulb flickered as he hummed softly, an old melody his father used to sing. He could still hear his father's voice echoing from memory. "Rafa, music is like prayer. You don't need to be loud, you just need to be true." Those words became his compass. When his father died, Rafa had stopped playing for nearly a year. It was his mother who convinced him to pick it back up. She'd found him one evening staring at the old drum under their bed and said, "Anak, your papa didn't leave us money. He left us music. Don't let it die too." From then on, Rafa played every single day, in jeepney terminals, outside malls, beside markets, anywhere people would stop for even a few seconds. He wasn't chasing coins, he was chasing connection. Each beat was a message to someone who might need it: a lonely child, a tired worker, a mother with too many worries. Sometimes, he'd play under the rain, wrapping his tabla in plastic when it poured too hard. People thought he was crazy, but when he played he felt alive. Every rhythm reminded him he was still here, still fighting. One humid Thursday afternoon, while Rafa was helping his mother refill vinegar bottles, the door suddenly burst open. His childhood friend Paulo stumbled in, panting and grinning ear to ear, waving a colorful flyer. "Bro, you won't believe this," he shouted, holding the paper like treasure. "Asia's Got Talent! They're doing open auditions in Manila this weekend." Rafa frowned. So. Paulo nearly fell over. "Bro, you should go. This is your shot." Rafa laughed nervously, shaking his head. "Me? Come on, Pao. Those people, they're professionals. They've got fancy instruments, managers, clothes that don't smell like fish balls." Paulo put a hand on his shoulder. "Exactly, bro. And that's why they need you. You've got something they don't." Rafa looked skeptical. "What's that?" "Sell." Paulo said simply. "You don't just play, you feel. Every time you perform in the streets, people stop. Even jeepney drivers forget to honk." Rafa smiled faintly but looked down. "You think the judges will care about a street kid with a drum?" "Not just a drum," Paulo said, tapping the tabla case. "That's your father's legacy. You've got to show them that real music doesn't need electricity, just heart." Teresa, who had been listening quietly, stepped forward. Her voice was gentle but firm. "He's right, Anak. You've been hiding your light for too long." "Ma, I'm not hiding," Rafa protested. "I just don't belong on a big stage." She wiped her hands on her apron and cupped his face. "Rafa, your father never played on a big stage either. But every time he played, people listened, because his heart was pure. You have that same gift. Maybe it's time the world hears it." Her words sank deep. Rafa stared at the flyer, bright colors, smiling judges, spotlights. The idea terrified him. The world beyond Quezon City felt too big, too shiny. But then he thought about his father, about all the mornings he'd played for people who had nothing, and still found joy in his beats. Maybe that's exactly why he should go. That night, Rafa couldn't sleep. He lay on his thin mattress, staring at the ceiling, listening to the hum of electric fans and distant karaoke songs. Doubt battled with hope inside him. What if they laughed at him? What if he froze on stage? What if, just maybe, he actually made it? He reached for his tabla, tracing the rim with his fingers. Pa, he whispered, if this is crazy, stop me. But if this is what I'm meant to do, please give me a sign. The room stayed silent for a moment. Until a sudden gust of wind blew through the window, knocking over a framed photo of his father holding the tabla. Rafa picked it up and smiled. I guess that's your answer. The next morning, before sunrise, he packed his father's tabla in a backpack, borrowed his friend's cleanest white shirt, and grabbed a small envelope with what little savings he had. His mother stood by the doorway, trying to hide her tears. Don't be nervous, she said softly. Just be you, that's enough. He hugged her tightly. I'll make you proud, Ma. You already have a knack, she whispered. No, go make them listen. As Rafa walked toward the bus station, the city was just waking up, vendors setting up stalls, children chasing each other, the smell of pandesal and Tahoe filling the air. He looked around at the people he'd performed for all his life and thought, this is who I'm doing it for. When he boarded the bus to Manila, he sat by the window, holding the tabla close like a child. Outside, the streets blurred into streaks of color, orange sunlight, green signs, gray smoke. He could almost hear his father's voice blending with the bus engine's hum, play from your heart, son. He closed his eyes, tapped a gentle beat on his knee, and whispered, for you, Papa. For all of us. The road stretched endlessly ahead, unknown, uncertain, but Rafa smiled, because for the first time in his life he wasn't just playing for the streets anymore, he was taking their rhythm with him, and somewhere deep inside, he knew, this journey was going to change everything. The bus ride to Manila felt longer than usual. Rafa had ridden that same route dozens of times when he went to help his uncle sell produce, but this trip was different. His heart thudded with a mix of excitement and fear, and his hands wouldn't stop tapping on his knees. A nervous rhythm only he could hear. When the bus finally pulled into the city terminal, he stepped off and took a deep breath. The air was thicker here, full of exhaust, chatter, and dreams that felt too big for him. The towering buildings of Makati loomed in the distance like another world altogether. Still, Rafa tightened the straps of his backpack, clutched the tabla close, and whispered to himself, let's do this. The audition venue was a massive hall inside a luxury mall, with banners screaming Asia's Got Talent, be the next star! Contestants filled the waiting area, some with glittery costumes, others with expensive guitars or keyboards. The air buzzed with tension, ambition, and perfume. Rafa felt out of place immediately. He wore a plain white shirt, faded jeans and flip-flops. His tabla, wrapped in an old cloth, looked like a relic among polished instruments. He tried to find a quiet corner, away from the noise. Beside him, two teenage dancers practiced their moves while a singer rehearsed high notes that echoed down the hall. A group of men carrying electric guitars were laughing loudly, cracking jokes. One of them noticed Rafa and his little drum. Hey, bro, the guy said, grinning. You joining the cooking competition or the talent show? His friends burst into laughter. Rafa forced a polite smile. Talent show, he replied softly. They exchanged looks. With that, one asked, pointing at the tabla, you sure, man? This isn't a street corner. Their laughter echoed long after they walked away. Rafa's smile faded. He lowered his eyes to the floor and stared at his hands, hands that had never known fame, only survival. For a moment he wondered if they were right. Maybe he didn't belong here. Maybe his music, born from noise and struggle, wasn't meant for a stage like this. He'd only ever played for people who stood because they had to wait for a jeepney, not because they wanted to listen. He could leave right now. Just quietly walk away. No one would notice. No one would miss him. But as he turned toward the door, a faint memory tugged at his heart. His father's voice, low and steady. When you play, Rafa, don't think of who's listening. Think of why you're playing. Rafa froze mid-step. The noise of the crowd faded. In his mind he saw his father again, sitting cross-legged in their small house, teaching him to play the tabla for the first time. He remembered how clumsy he'd been, how the beats had sounded uneven. But his father had smiled through it all. Music isn't about perfection. His father had said, it's about truth. Play your truth, Anak, that's your gift. The words echoed so clearly it felt like his father was right there beside him. Rafa turned back and sat down again, pulling out his tabla. Slowly he began to tap. Quietly at first, then stronger, his fingers finding rhythm. Heads turned. Even the mocking contestants glanced his way. He didn't care anymore. He started humming under his breath, a melody that carried both pain and hope. Then he added words, weaving rap lines between beats. They laugh at the drum I play, but this sound raised me every day. My father's dream, my mama's fight, I'll keep their rhythm through the night. By the time he stopped, a few people were clapping quietly. Not mockingly this time, genuinely. A woman waiting nearby smiled and said, that's beautiful, Kuya, don't let them stop you. Rafa smiled faintly. Salamat, he whispered. Thank you. He realized something then. The fear wasn't about failure, it was about being misunderstood. But music didn't need understanding. It needed feeling. And that, he had in abundance. A few hours later an assistant called out contestant 174 Rafael de Vera. Rafa's pulse spiked, he took a deep breath, gripped the tabla, and followed her down a narrow corridor that led to the stage. The hum of the audience grew louder with every step. He peeked through the curtain and froze. The stage was huge, the lights were blinding. Thousands of faces blurred into a glowing sea. And right there, the judges. 4 of them, including the famous Simon Cowell, whose expression could turn anyone's confidence into dust. Rafa's throat went dry, his hands felt like ice. For a brief second, he thought of turning back again. What if he made a fool of himself? What if the judges laughed, like those men backstage? He closed his eyes and whispered, "Pa, give me courage." Then, as if on cue, a light breeze brushed his face from the side of the stage. A whisper of air that felt strangely familiar, like the comforting pat his father used to give him before every street performance. When the stage hand gave him a nod, Rafa walked out under the lights. The audience grew silent, curious about the barefoot boy carrying a drum. Simon raised an eyebrow. "Hello there, what's your name?" "Rafael de Vera, sir," he replied, his voice barely above a whisper. "And what will you be doing for us today?" another judge asked. Rafa hesitated, glancing at his tabla. "I'll be rapping, singing and playing this." That caused a small ripple ladder across the hall. The judges exchanged amused looks. "All at once?" Simon asked skeptically. "Yes, sir," Rafa said, standing taller now. "All at once." Simon leaned back. "Well, this should be interesting. Whenever you're ready." The stage fell into silence again. The lights dimmed, a single spotlight focusing on him. Rafa sat cross-legged, set the tableau in front of him, and closed his eyes. His heart was pounding so loudly he thought the microphones might pick it up. For a moment, he let his fingers rest on the drum, feeling the texture, the warmth. This was the same tabla that had heard his first laugh, caught his first tears, carried his father's final song. It wasn't just an instrument, it was family. He whispered softly, "Let's make them feel it, Pa." Then, he began to play. The first few beats were gentle, steady, like a heartbeat. Then, his hands moved faster, bringing the tabla to life. The rhythm filled the hall, catching everyone off guard. Before anyone could process it, he started rapping over the beat, his voice deep, raw, alive. "They told me I'm small, just a voice in the street, but I carry the world with the drums at my feet. My mama's prayers, my papa's tone. This rhythm's the blood that makes me my own." The crowd leaned in. His rap transitioned seamlessly into a soulful melody, his voice rising, trembling, but filled with emotion. Then back into rhythm, the tabla following every word like a second heartbeat. No backing track, no band, just one man, singing, rapping, drumming, as if 3 souls lived inside one body. The audience fell completely silent. Even the judges leaned forward, eyes wide. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't loud, but it was real, painfully, beautifully real. When he finished, Rafa lifted his head slowly. The last beat echoed in the air, then vanished. For a moment, no one moved. Then someone clapped, then another, and then, the entire hall rose to its feet. But that moment, that standing ovation, belonged to scene 4. For now, Rafa could only sit there on the stage, breathing hard, the tabla still warm under his hands. He didn't know if he'd won or lost. All he knew was that he hadn't run away. He'd faced his fear, he'd found his voice, and as he looked up at the bright lights, he whispered again, "We did it, Pa." The lights dimmed as the stage crew reset the setup for the next performance. The audience murmured with anticipation, some whispering about the Filipino kid with the drums. Backstage, Jomar's hands trembled slightly as he adjusted his mic. His tabla was placed in front of him, the wooden shells polished and glowing under the spotlights. His heart pounded so loudly he could almost hear it over the music of the previous act. He closed his eyes and whispered under his breath, "Para kay nani, para sa lahat ang naniwala." Then, his name was called. Next up, all the way from the Philippines, "Give it up for Jomar." The crowd cheered, polite but curious. To them, he was just another contestant in the sea of hopefuls. But to Jomar, this moment was the crossroads of his life. He took a deep breath and stepped into the light. Simon Cowell leaned back in his chair, eyebrow arched as he noticed the tabla. "What's that?" he whispered to Amanda. "It's an Indian drum," she replied softly. "Interesting choice." Jomar stood before them, barefoot, wearing a simple white shirt and jeans. He held the mic close, smiled nervously and introduced himself. "Magandang gabi po, good evening. My name is Jomar Reyes. I'm from Quezon City, Philippines. I rap, I sing and I play the tabla." There was a short pause. Then laughter rippled gently through the crowd, not mocking but amused. A rapper with a drum. The judges exchanged curious looks. "All right," Jomar Simon said with a slight grin. "Show us what you've got." The lights focused on him. The world around him blurred, the noise faded, and all that remained was the tabla before him and the heartbeat of 1,000 dreams waiting to burst out. He lifted his hands and struck the drums. The first beats rolled out like thunder wrapped in silk, sharp, alive and full of rhythm. The audience instantly fell silent. Then, with perfect timing, he began to rap. It wasn't the kind of rap that screamed anger or ego. His verses were full of heart, storytelling and hope. I came from streets where dreams got dust, Mama said, son. Keep your trust, people laugh when they see me pray, but I see light in the hardest day. Every word was woven with emotion, each beat syncing perfectly with the tabla. His hands moved with lightning speed, his voice riding each rhythm like a wave. The audience began to sway, their eyes locked on him. The rhythm intensified. Then, without warning, he shifted gears, his rap softened into a soulful melody. When the night feels cold, and you've lost your way, keep your heart on fire, let your soul play. His voice, warm and unfiltered, soared through the arena. And all the while his hands never stopped, the tabla echoed like a heartbeat under his song. Gasps filled the room, people leaned forward. Simon, who had been casually observing, now sat upright, his expression frozen between disbelief and awe. Amanda covered her mouth. He's doing all three at once, she whispered. Rapping, singing, and, oh my God, playing those drums. The tempo grew faster, and Jomar's words became more powerful. This ain't just rhythm, this is my prayer, for every child who's fighting out there. We ain't rich, but we've got dreams, and dreams can roar louder than screams. By now, the audience was clapping along. The tabla beats reverberated through the floor, pulsing with life. His fingers flew, his voice climbed, and the arena filled with an energy that no one expected from a quiet boy with a drum. Then came the bridge, the part of his song he had written just for this moment. He looked straight into the crowd, into the cameras, and sang softly, tears forming in his eyes. Mama, your boy's on stage tonight. I kept my promise, I fought the fight. Every bruise, every tear, brought me to this song right here. His voice cracked, but it was beautiful. The raw emotion made the words even more powerful. You could feel his journey, the pain, the hunger, the struggle, and the unshakable hope pouring through every syllable. When the final note faded, Jomar bowed his head, breathing hard. The last echo of the tabla lingered like the memory of thunder. For a few seconds, there was complete silence, and then an explosion of applause. The crowd stood on their feet, clapping, shouting, whistling. Tears streamed down faces. Some had never even heard of the tabla before, but now it felt like part of their own heartbeat. Amanda stood, wiping her eyes. That was unbelievable, she said softly. You didn't just perform, Jomar, you told a story. You made us feel your life. Bruno was almost bouncing in his seat. That was pure artistry. The rhythm, the flow, the emotion. It's like nothing I've ever seen before. The audience roared again, but everyone waited for Simon. He leaned forward, eyes fixed on Jomar. His expression was unreadable for a long, tense moment. Then he said quietly, you know, Jomar, I've seen thousands of performances on this stage, but I've never seen someone rap, sing, and play an instrument simultaneously, with heart, with soul, and with meaning. The arena went silent. Simon continued, his tone softer now. You reminded me what music is supposed to do. It's not just about talent, it's about truth, and you, my friend, are the truth. The crowd erupted once more, but this time Simon lifted his hand, then slammed the golden buzzer. Confetti burst from above like a rain of golden light. Jomar stood frozen, his mouth open, tears streaming down his face. The sound of the crowd washed over him, and in that golden storm, he dropped to his knees, holding his tabla close like an old friend who had never left his side. As the stage glittered with light, Jomar whispered to himself, Nene, we made it. Behind the scenes, producers watched the moment in stunned silence. Even the camera crew wiped their eyes. It wasn't just a performance, it was a prayer, a story of struggle and survival that touched everyone who witnessed it. Simon got up from his seat, walked to the stage, and placed a hand on Jomar's shoulder. Don't ever stop doing what you just did, he said. Because the world needs to hear that kind of heart. The crowd chanted his name. Jomar! Jomar! And for the first time in his life, he didn't feel like the boy who sold CDs at street corners. He felt like someone who had turned pain into music, and silence into applause. His dream had just begun. The confetti had long stopped falling, but Jomar still stood on that stage trembling. The golden light around him shimmered like sunlight through tears. The judges were on their feet. The audience was still chanting his name, and in the midst of it all, he just smiled. It wasn't the grin of a performer who had just won. It was something gentler, deeper. The kind of smile that comes from someone who knows they've finally made someone proud who isn't even in the room. Backstage, as the cameras flashed and the producers congratulated him, Jomar's hands still clutched his tabla. It had been through everything with him, scratched, worn, its edges darkened from years of use, but it was beautiful in its scars. Just like him, he looked around, a little dazed, as people kept saying things like, "You're going viral already," and, "You're a legend, man." But the only thought that mattered to him was, "I need to call Nene." When he finally got to a quiet corner, away from the chaos of the show, he pulled out his phone. The signal was weak, but he dialed home anyway. After 3 rings, a familiar, trembling voice answered. "Hello, Nene." His voice cracked immediately. "Anak, is that you?" "Nene, I did it," he whispered, unable to stop his tears now. "I got the golden buzzer." There was a pause. just the sound of soft breathing on the other end. Then his mother's voice came thick with emotion, "You did, yes, Nene. You should have seen it.
The lights, the crowd. Simon hit the buzzer!
The confetti, it was like it was raining stars." His mother laughed through her sobs. "I told you, Anak, God listens when you sing with a good heart. You didn't just play music tonight. You made the whole world listen." Her words wrapped around him like a warm blanket. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. They didn't have to. Across thousands of miles, they both felt the same thing: peace, pride, and a love that had carried them through every storm. After the call, Jomar walked outside into the quiet night behind the studio. The city lights sparkled like the confetti that had fallen hours ago. The cool air hit his face, carrying with it the faint hum of applause still echoing in his ears. He sat down on a low wall and placed the tabla beside him. "You and me, buddy," he murmured, running a hand over its surface. "We did it." But as he sat there, something shifted inside him. It wasn't enough that he had made it. He thought of the street kids who used to watch him perform near the market. Faces full of dreams but empty pockets. He thought of little boys playing music on empty cans, of girls singing to traffic noise, hoping someone might stop to listen. They needed to feel this too. That night, as the world exploded with his video, racking up millions of views, reactions, and news articles calling him the Filipino rhythm prodigy, Jomar didn't sleep. He stayed awake, planning something bigger than fame. In the morning, when he returned to the contestant's house, he gathered a few of his things and made a call to a producer. "Sir, I want to do something special for my next appearance," he said. "I don't just want to perform alone. I want to bring some kids from back home." The producer sounded skeptical. "Kids? Like a group?"
Yes.
Jomar said firmly. "They're from my barangay. They play on tin cans, bottles, whatever they can find. I want to show that music lives everywhere, even in the poorest corners." It took a few weeks, but with the help of sponsors who were moved by his story, Jomar's dream came true. When he returned to the AGT stage for the semifinals, he wasn't alone. Behind him stood 5 Filipino street kids, barefoot, shy, holding improvised instruments. The audience gasped. Even Simon leaned forward. "What's this, Jomar?" he asked. Jomar smiled. "Sir, these are my friends. They come from the same place I did. They reminded me that music doesn't need money. It just needs a heart." And when the beat started, the magic began again. This time, it wasn't just Jomar's voice. The kids joined in with rhythm sticks, makeshift drums, and harmonies that blended with his tabla like it was destiny. Together, they performed a song called "One Heart, One Beat." It wasn't perfect, but it was real. Every smile, every missed cue, every laugh from the children. It was pure joy. The audience clapped along, many of them in tears once again. When the song ended, Simon stood without hesitation. "That," he said slowly, "is what the world needs: hope, unity, and the reminder that music doesn't come from fame or wealth, it comes from the soul. You, Jomar, have a heart that could heal the world." It wasn't just applause that followed, it was a standing ovation that lasted so long the cameras had to cut away. The kids on stage hugged Jomar, laughing and crying, their faces glowing in the stage lights. And Jomar, he wasn't thinking about the prize anymore. He was thinking about how those kids would go home believing in themselves. How maybe, somewhere in the crowd, another child would see them and think, "If they can, I can too." After the show, as reporters swarmed him with questions, Jomar simply said, "I didn't come here to win. I came here to give back. Because every talent, every success, means nothing if you don't use it to lift others." That quote spread everywhere. It became a banner of inspiration across social media. Schools in the Philippines started using his story as a lesson in perseverance. Charities reached out to him to collaborate on programs for young street musicians. Months later, Jomar used his prize money not to buy luxury, not to move abroad, but to build a small music center in Quezon City. He called it the Rhythm House. It had open walls, so everyone could hear the music spilling out into the streets. He taught children how to play, how to find rhythm in everyday sounds. He gave away free instruments, held community concerts, and every night, before closing up, he'd sit by the door and play his tabla under the streetlight. Sometimes the same street kids who once begged for coins now performed beside him. With confidence and joy. One evening, a foreign tourist passed by and filmed a short clip of Jomar playing with the children. The caption read, "From the world stage to the street stage, this man never forgot where he came from." It went viral again. But Jomar never cared about the numbers anymore. For him, success wasn't the golden buzzer or the applause. It was seeing a child smile because they had just learned their first rhythm. It was hearing laughter instead of hunger in his neighborhood. It was knowing that kindness, once shared, echoes forever, like a drum beat that never fades. And so, every night, under the glow of the Manila sky, Jomar would look up and whisper, "Woo did it, Nene. But this time it's all of us." The tabla would answer with a soft, steady rhythm, his life's heartbeat continuing on.